The night Harlow O.C. Pemberton was asked to leave a hotel lobby in her own city, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't reach for her phone. She stood very still, the way she'd learned to stand, when the world decided it needed to remind her of something it assumed she'd forgotten. She was 61 years old. She had spent 32 of those years on the bench. But that comes later. It was a Thursday evening in late October, the kind that arrives in Ottawa without apology. Cold, already. The sky, the color of old pewter, the wind off the river, sharp enough to make you reconsider everything about your life choices north of 45 degrees. Harlow had just come from a session that had run 4 hours longer than scheduled. A custody matter. Ugly, the way custody matters always are when money is involved and love is long gone. She was tired in the particular way that courtrooms tire you. Not physically, but somewhere behind the eyes. She'd stopped at the Meridian Grand because her regular parking structure was blocked off for a water main repair, and the hotel's underground lot offered guest validation for a fee. She'd parked, taken the elevator up, and crossed the marble lobby toward the front desk to arrange the ticket. That was all. A 2-minute transaction she'd done a dozen times before at hotels across the country. The man behind the desk, young, sandy-haired, a name tag that read Brett, looked up from his screen, looked at her, and then looked at her again in the way that means the first look didn't produce the result that was expected. "Can I help you?" he said. His tone made the question sound like its opposite. "Just the parking validation," Harlow said. "I'm in the underground lot." Brett glanced past her toward the entrance. "Are you a guest of the hotel?" "I'm using the parking facility." "I understand you validate for a fee. That's typically for guests or conference attendees." "I see. Is there a minimum spend?" "I'm happy to." "I'm going to have to ask you to speak with security," he said, and he said it quietly, the way people say things they've been trained to say when they want you to know the conversation is over without having to be the one who ends it. She blinked. "I'm sorry." "I'm sorry. We've had some concerns this evening." About individuals in the lobby. He still hadn't met her eyes properly. He was looking somewhere, just above her left ear. Security can assist you. There were 4 other people in the lobby visible from where Harlow stood. 2 of them were white men in business suits, one of them on a phone, the other reading something on a tablet. A young white woman was checking in at the far end of the desk. An older white couple stood near the elevators with luggage. Not one of them had been approached. Not one of them was being redirected to security. Harlow set her parking ticket on the counter, very deliberately, the way she set documents on her bench when she wanted a lawyer to understand she had read every word. "I'll wait," she said, "for security." His name was Dale Folds, security supervisor, 12 years with the hotel, a man who moved through the lobby with the particular confidence of someone who had rarely been wrong and had never been corrected. He came toward her with his shoulders squared, and his expression set to something between courtesy and authority, the combination that people in his position deployed when they wanted you to feel managed rather than dismissed. "Ma'am," he said, "I understand there's been a concern." "There's been no concern," Harlow said. "I parked in your underground lot and came to arrange validation. Your desk associate redirected me to you." Folds looked at Brett. Brett gave him the kind of look that said, "You understand, don't you?" "Can I see some identification?" Folds said. Around them, the lobby continued its Thursday evening rhythm. The man on the phone laughed at something. The couple by the elevator pressed the button again. No one looked over. "May I ask," Harlow said carefully, "whether you've requested identification from the other guests in the lobby this evening?" Folds' jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It's standard procedure when there's a concern raised. What was the concern specifically? A pause. A very small one, but a pause nonetheless. That you appeared to be loitering. Harlow had been in the lobby for approximately 4 minutes at that point. She had walked in, crossed the marble floor, and stood at the front desk. The word loitering hung in the air between them, like something that knew it had no business being there. "I'd like to speak to the general manager," she said. "The manager is occupied." "Then I'll wait." Folds shifted his weight. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to either produce identification or vacate the premises." Those are your options at this time. And there it was. Not a question anymore, not even a performance of courtesy, just the blunt thing underneath, finally said out loud. Harlow looked at him for a moment. She thought about 32 years. She thought about the custody case that had ended 4 hours late and the 2 children at the center of it who would grow up shaped by whatever the court decided. She thought about every room she had ever walked into where the air shifted when she arrived, where people did the calculation quickly and quietly and decided she had come to the wrong place. She reached into her coat pocket and produced her identification. Not her driver's license, not her parking ticket. Her judicial identification, the one issued by the Office of the Commissioner for Federal Judicial Affairs. The one with the crest. She placed it on the counter the same way she'd placed the parking ticket. Flat, deliberate, no ceremony. Folds picked it up. She watched his face do the thing faces do when they encounter information they were not prepared for and cannot immediately process. It starts around the eyes, then the mouth does something uncertain. Then there's a stillness that isn't calm. It's the stillness of a person who has suddenly understood that the ground they were standing on is not what they believed it to be. I'm a federally appointed judge, Harlow said. I have been one for 18 years. I parked in your lot, I came to your desk, and I was redirected to security for doing exactly what every other guest in this lobby has done this evening without incident. She let that sit for a second. I'd still like to speak with the general manager, but now I'd also like the name of the individual who raised the initial concern, the time it was raised, and the nature of the concern as it was logged. Folds set the identification card back on the counter with the care of a man diffusing something. I'll get the manager, he said. Thank you, said Harlow O.C. Pemberton. I'll be right here. Here is what you need to understand about Harlow, because none of what follows makes sense without it. She was born in Scarborough, Ontario, the second of 4 children. Her father drove a transit bus for 31 years. Her mother worked in hospital administration and ran the choir at their church with an attention to detail that Harlow would later recognize as the same quality that made a good courtroom judge: the ability to hold many moving parts in your head simultaneously and know exactly when something was off-key. Harlow had been told, at various points in her life, that she was in the wrong place. At 12, in a gifted program at a school across town, where the other students' parents were doctors and engineers, and where she was the only black girl in the room for 3 years running. At 24, articling at a Bay Street firm, where a partner had once looked at her resume, then looked at her, and asked if she was sure she had the right office. At 38, when her appointment to the bench was announced and a colleague she had considered a friend, had said, in what he clearly believed was a compliment, that she was a credit to the program. Each time she had done the same thing her mother taught her. She stood still, she breathed, she waited. Patience, her mother used to say, is not passivity. Patience is knowing that time moves in your favor when you have done the work. Harlow had done the work. She'd presided over more than 4,000 cases. She had written decisions that were cited by appellate courts, quoted in legal journals, used in law school classrooms. She had served on 2 judicial conduct committees. She was 2 years from eligibility for senior status and had not yet decided whether to take it. Not because she was tired, but because she was not. She was, by any reasonable measure, formidable. She was also, on that Thursday evening in October, just a woman in a hotel lobby who had been asked to explain herself while everyone else was left alone. The general manager's name was Patricia Drummond, and she arrived with the expression of someone who had received a call she did not yet fully understand, but had correctly identified as serious. She was in her early 50s, efficient-looking, a hotel lanyard around her neck, and a phone in her hand that she pocketed as she crossed the lobby. She saw Folds first, then she saw Harlow. Then she saw the identification card on the counter, still lying where Harlow had placed it. Her pace changed, not dramatically, but you would have noticed it if you were watching. A slight quickening. The posture adjusting, the face reorganizing itself. "Good evening," she said. "I'm Patricia Drummond, the general manager. I understand there's been a situation." "There has been," Harlow said. Can you tell me what happened? So, Harlow told her. Simply, without embellishment, in the same register she used when summarizing the facts of a case before delivering a ruling. She did not raise her voice. She did not use the word racist, though the word sat in the room with them the way certain words do. Present even when unspoken, shaping the air around everything else. Drummond listened. She had the quality of someone who was genuinely listening, which is rarer than it should be and was particularly noticeable in that moment. When Harlow finished, Drummond turned to Folds. Did you request her identification while guests were present in the lobby who had not been asked for theirs? Folds said nothing for a moment. There was a concern raised by. Did you? Yes. Drummond turned back to Harlow. I owe you an apology, directly and without qualification. What happened here tonight was wrong. I appreciate that, Harlow said. I'd also appreciate understanding what process this hotel has for situations like this, both for the incident itself and for the staff involved. Drummond nodded. I'd like to discuss that with you properly. If you're willing to come to my office, I can. I have somewhere to be, Harlow said. But I'll give you my contact information, and I'd like yours, including your corporate regional directors. She watched Drummond hesitate for just a fraction of a second, not resistant, calculating, deciding how far up this was going to travel. Of course, Drummond said. What Drummond could not have known, as she exchanged business cards with a woman she'd just met in her own lobby, was that Harlow O.C. Pemberton had served for the previous 6 years on the advisory committee of the Canadian Judicial Council's Judicial Education Program. She had co-authored a module on implicit bias in institutional settings that was used in training programs across the country, including, in an irony so neat it would have felt contrived if you'd put it in a story, programs used by several major hotel chains for their management staff. She also sat on the board of 2 charitable foundations, was a patron of a legal aid clinic in her city's East End, and maintained a professional profile so clean and so substantial that when the story eventually surfaced, as it was going to surface, because some things cannot be contained no matter how carefully they are managed, there was not a single fact that could be muddied, not a single angle from which she could be made to look like anything other than exactly what she was. A judge who had been treated badly in a hotel lobby because of the color of her skin. But none of that was what made Harlow Harlow. What made Harlow Harlow was what she did in the 6 days between that Thursday evening and the moment things became very public indeed. She called no one that night. She went home, made tea, and sat at her kitchen table with a notepad. The paper kind, she'd never stopped using them, and wrote down everything she remembered. The time she'd entered the lobby, the time Brett had spoken to her, the precise words used by Folds in the order they'd been said, the names on the badges, the names she'd been given, the corporate contact information. She dated the page and signed it, because she was a judge and old habits are old habits. Then she closed the notepad and went to bed. The next morning, she called the hotel's corporate regional director, not to threaten, not to demand, to inform and to ask a question. What was their process, in writing, for situations of this kind, and what documentation could they provide showing how the incident had been logged? The regional director, a man named Russell Hatch, received the call with the wariness of someone who had received calls like this before and was accustomed to making them go away. He offered an apology and a complimentary stay. He mentioned how highly they regarded all their guests. He used the phrase regrettable misunderstanding once, which Harlow noted. She asked her question again. He told her the documentation would be provided within a week. She thanked him and ended the call. 3 days later, she received a letter on hotel letterhead, brief, vague, using words like procedure review and staff refresher and isolated incident. The tone was the tone of a document written by legal counsel for legal counsel. It acknowledged nothing specific. It committed to nothing specific. It was the written equivalent of Folds's look when he'd handed back her identification. The look of a person who understood the situation perfectly and was choosing to understand it as narrowly as possible. Harlow read it twice. She filed it. She picked up her phone and called a colleague, Not a lawyer, not a judge, but a journalist she'd known for 15 years who covered institutional accountability for one of the national papers, and who had, on more than one occasion, told her that if she ever had something worth talking about, she should call. "I might have something," Harlow said. The story ran on a Tuesday. It was not a short story. It ran with Harlow's photograph, a professional one she approved, and with the hotel's letter reproduced in part, and with a statement from Drummond that said all the right things and, between its careful lines, revealed that the hotel had understood from the beginning exactly how serious this was. It also ran with a comment from Russell Hatch that included the phrase "regrettable misunderstanding" again, which, given that it now appeared in print beneath a photograph of a federally appointed judge describing being asked to vacate a hotel lobby, had a different quality than it had over the phone. By Wednesday morning, it had been picked up nationally. By Wednesday afternoon, it had crossed the border. By Thursday, the hotel's corporate parent had issued a statement of their own, longer, more specific, more apologetic in tone, that announced an immediate review of their security and front desk protocols across all Canadian properties, mandatory training updates, and an independent audit of incident reports from the previous 3 years. They also announced that Dale Folds had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal review. Brett's name did not appear in any official statement, though it was noted in subsequent reporting that front desk staff had also been included in the review. Harlow did not speak publicly about the audit or the leave. When reporters asked her for further comment, she said that she hoped the review would be thorough and that she hoped it would result in meaningful change, and that she had confidence in the process. Both statements were entirely true and entirely non-committal, in the way that only a person with 32 years of judicial experience can make a true statement non-committal. What the statements and the audit and the corporate review did not capture, what never made it into the news cycle because news cycles are not interested in the parts of stories that don't fit a headline, was a conversation that took place about 2 weeks after the article ran. It happened in Harlow's office at the courthouse, in the late afternoon when the building was mostly quiet. She had a meeting scheduled with a young articling student who'd been placed with her for the term, a woman in her mid-20s named Simone, second-generation Jamaican-Canadian, first in her family to go to law school, with the kind of quietly ferocious intelligence that Harlow recognized because she had once been its exact shape. Simone had read the article. Everyone had read the article, but she hadn't brought it up, and Harlow hadn't brought it up, and for 2 weeks they had continued their routine of case review and procedural discussion and the particular kind of mentorship that happens in the spaces between the formal work. That afternoon, Simone knocked on the doorframe and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sit down," Harlow said. Simone sat. She was quiet for a moment, choosing her words with the care of someone who has learned that words in certain rooms carry weight. "When he asked you to leave," she said, "what did you feel?" It was not the question Harlow had expected. Most people asked what she'd thought, what she'd decided, what she'd planned. No one had asked what she'd felt. She was quiet for a moment herself. "Tired," she said finally. Not surprised, but tired. Simone nodded slowly. "And the ID. Taking it out, was that a choice? Or did it just happen?" "It was a choice," Harlow said. "I thought about it. What were you choosing between?" Harlow looked at her for a moment. Outside the window, the light was going, the sky doing its late October thing. "Between showing them who I was in their terms," she said, "and making them sit with the discomfort of not knowing, both have a cost. Both have a purpose." She paused. "I showed them, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I wanted them to see it happen, clearly, with no room to misread it. I wanted the moment to be legible." Simone was quiet. Then she said, "Did it work? Look at what's happened in the past 2 weeks. I don't mean." Simone stopped. "I mean, did it work for you?" Inside. And Harlow looked at this young woman, 26 years old, sharp as anything, carrying whatever she was carrying, the way young black women in professional spaces carry things, quietly and completely, and without putting it down. And she said something she hadn't said to anyone else. "Not entirely," she said. It's not the identification card that should have changed the situation. It's the fact that I was a human being standing in a lobby. That should have been enough. Simone didn't say anything. But the card mattered, Harlow said. The card will matter for the audit and the training and the policy review. And those will matter for the next woman who walks into that lobby without a card. She let that sit. Hold on to both things, she said. That something worked, and that it shouldn't have had to. Don't let anyone convince you that because the system responded, the system was fine. The independent audit the hotel's corporate parent commissioned was completed in early February. Its findings were not made public in full, but a summary was released that noted procedural inconsistencies in how security incidents had been logged across multiple properties, with particular patterns in how incidents involving non-white guests had been categorized and escalated. The audit recommended 11 specific changes to protocol and training. The hotel group accepted all 11. A spokesperson said that the company was committed to being a place where every guest felt welcome and respected. A spokesperson always says this. The question is always whether the thing said and the thing done share the same address. In this case, 3 of the 11 recommendations had been implemented by the end of the fiscal quarter. Whether the other 8 follow will depend on attention spans and quarterly reports and the slow, unsexy work of institutional change that begins with a lawsuit threat or a news story and continues. If it continues, only because specific people stay specific and do not allow anything to become general. Harlow was one of those people. She did not let anything become general. That spring, she returned to the Meridian Grand, not the same location, a different property, in Vancouver, where she was speaking at a judicial conference. She parked in the underground lot. She took the elevator up. She crossed the marble lobby to the front desk. The young woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. "Good evening. Are you checking in?" "I am," Harlow said. "Can I get a name?" "O.C. Pemberton." "Harlow O.C. Pemberton," the woman typed, looked at the screen, looked up again with a smile that carried nothing in it except the ordinary business of a hotel check-in on a spring evening. "I have you here. 2 nights, judicial conference rate. Do you need help with your parking ticket as well?" "I do, actually," Harlow said. "Happy to help with that." She looked around the lobby. The same marble floors, the same indifferent elegance, the same assortment of travelers moving through their own evenings. A man in a suit on a phone, a family with too much luggage, an older woman reading something in an armchair by the window. An ordinary lobby, which was what it should always have been. Harlow picked up her key card, tucked her parking ticket into her coat pocket, and crossed to the elevator. She pressed the button. She waited. The door opened. She stepped inside, turned, and watched the lobby for a moment. As the doors began to close, the desk, the chairs, the ordinary movement of ordinary life, and then it was gone, and the elevator was rising, and somewhere up above her a room was waiting that was just a room, and tomorrow morning she would stand at a podium and speak to 200 judges about the responsibilities of the bench, and she would mean every word. She always did.